Genesis chapter 22. We're closing off 22 and getting into 23, and this is a transition period. In fact, I've entitled this message, Time to Settle In. And I think you'll understand once we get there of where we're going. And this is kind of an interesting section, because at first I was reading through it and I'm thinking, how am I going to make this into a sermon? And then when you back up and you start to understand what's going on here and the background that's happening, you start to get a little cue in on how God's working here. So this is needed. Oftentimes people say, why is this even in the Bible? But it is essential. It's a transition time where we're going from Abraham and Sarah to now Isaac and Rebekah. And really, we don't hang out too long in Isaac and Rebekah, and we're moving on to Jacob and Esau and all of them. So it's coming rather quickly. And you think maybe Isaac and Rebekah would learn from all that Abraham and Sarah dealt with. Guess what? They don't. They make some of the same bad decisions, and then you think, oh, well, Jacob will get this, and Esau, maybe we'll have some perfect families by that point. And since most of us have read that passage, we understand that we are not going to be looking at any perfect families anytime soon. So I think that would be, when Jesus comes back for us, we might have some perfect families at that point, but will we even understand family units at that point? Who knows, all right? So it's interesting. But as we get into this, I want us to get on a thought process here, okay? So in understanding my title here, Time to Settle In, since we have some kids in here, maybe we'll start with the kids. How about this? So maybe back in the day when you had children at home, or maybe you've got children at home right now, and they come home and from school, and they're crying. Ethan does this about every day, right? Yeah, he's looking at me weird. But anyway, they come home crying, and they're in distress, and the first thing you're thinking is, what in the world is going on, right? Dads are like, really, what's next, okay? And then moms, oh, come on in, bring it in, let's hug this out. Some of your moms are not like that. But suck it up, buttercup, maybe that's what you're saying. But all of a sudden, you find out that Susie said something mean, and they were best friends with your child, and they said something mean, and they're no longer friends. You know, like, your children, it's interesting because in the matter of 24 hours, or no, let's just go to like the 6-hour school day, they have become friends and lost friends at least 27 times with the same person. Have you ever noticed that? Okay. And then you get to junior high, and then all of a sudden, these girls and boys start noticing each other, and they think that they have to date. So they become boyfriend and girlfriend at least 27 times within a day, right? Have you ever seen that happen? Well, I'm dumping you. No, I'm dumping you first, okay? And then, well, I missed you so much, the last 25 minutes in class, and so let's make up. But what? Yes, it happens, okay? Don't look at me weird like that. But then they come home, and they're all distressed, and what do they say? I don't have any friends anymore. I'm quitting school. Take me to a different school. There's another school in the next town over. I know that it'll be perfect there. Because nothing goes wrong in Morrisonville. I hear Pana's got such a great district there. Let's go over to Pana. Because 16 miles will totally change my entire outlook on school. And you look at this child, and you've got to take it seriously, right? Because we're loving parents. And you say, hold on just a second. You go into the other room. You laugh. Get composure. You come back in. We've all been there, right? Okay. Maybe some of you aren't like me, I guess. Pray for my kids. I have a different type of parenting scheme. But anyway, you come back in and you say, listen, things happen. Go say hi to her tomorrow. You'll become friends again. You can do your pinky promise. Whatever it is, it'll be okay. You're not leaving school. You're going back. And it doesn't matter when they wake up the next day. I don't know how it happens in the generations right now, okay? But back in my day, let me just say that, okay? Back in my day, if I would have told my parents, I'm not going to school today because somebody doesn't like me, I think even my mom would laugh at me at that point. You're going to school. Get in the vehicle. Get out of bed. Get dressed. Get in the vehicle. Let's go. You're going to school. Now, we laugh because it's just kid stuff. Well, let's go to the adults. How about that? Okay? You ever had a bad day at work? You ever had a bad day at the doctor's office? You ever had a bad day in Walmart? You ever have a bad day in Illinois? I didn't hear much on that last one. You ever decide, I quit. I'm done. I'm out. I'm moving away. Now, I've heard some of you say that, okay? I think we've all felt that. But then we wake up the next morning and say, well, I'm not moving away. I'm still here. And it's all in this time frame of sometimes when we face loss, emotionally we feel like getting out. But then you realize, even if you move to Tennessee, there's still problems there. And you talk to people in Tennessee, and they say, oh, I want to move out of Tennessee because Tennessee is so bad. You find it everywhere. And then you realize, okay, the truth of it is, you're going to have problems everywhere you go. And so emotionally, I want to get out of this situation, but where has God called me? Has God given me this job to wake up the next day and to go back to work? Has God given me this difficult drivers all around me, okay, in wherever you are, who cut you off, who do weird things on the roadway? I mean, just things that we get emotional, like, I quit driving. Have you ever felt like that, okay? Just these people are weird on the roadway. If you ever drive in Chicago, that's probably how you feel every day. I'm done. I'm going to take the bus. I'm done with these people. And emotionally, we respond to where we want to quit, but then we get back up and realize, okay, God's called me to live this life where I'm at. Obviously, He's put me here. So it's time to settle in. And I need to do what needs to be done in order to settle in, because, yes, God has called me where I'm at, but yet I also have the responsibility to live and to like and to represent Him where I'm at. And so as we jump into this, let's go to Genesis chapter 22, verses 20 through 24. We'll jump through this. This is going to be really quick. It says, and it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, behold, Milcah, she has also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. So all of a sudden we're taking a journey back to Abraham's family from before. Why? Because we're refreshing there, and then we're jumping forward. We're connecting to another person coming on down the line. Huz is firstborn, and Buz his brother. Wow, isn't that interesting? Okay, if any of you have twins, then you call them Huz and Buz. Anyway, all right. And Kemuel, the father of Aram. And Chesed, maybe that's Chedorlaomer's brother. I don't know. You remember him, King Cheddar? Yeah, anyway. And Chesed and Hazo and Pildash and Jidlaph and Bethuel. Who did I say was going to read all these last time? Okay. And Bethuel begat Rebekah. Anybody recognize that name? What are we doing? We're connecting the dots. We're making this a reality. This is not some figment of imagination. These are families that down the line, they're having children, and those children are having children, and those children are having children, and all of a sudden we get to Rebekah, who's going to be connected to Isaac here pretty soon. These 8 Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother, and his concubine, whose name was Reumah. She bare also Teba and Gaham and Dahash and Makah, something like that, okay? So as we get through that, we understand, okay, all right, all of these names, why? Because these are real people, these are real families, connecting the dots, because we know that later on down the line that Isaac is going to end up with Rebekah. We're just transitioning those thoughts, okay? Then all of a sudden we come to chapter number 23, and they're even more of a transition time as we have a moment for loss. Anybody struggle when you have loss? Okay, anybody's investments have loss lately? Anybody get stressed out about that? Anybody's spouse look at those every single day and their blood pressure raises, they get red in the face? Okay, now let's go on to the other side of things. Have you ever lost a family member and it's a big struggle? Lost a friend? Coming up in June, I'm going to be doing a memorial service for my friend that passed away. That's going to be tough. I think I'm probably going to blubber through half of it, just because of when you recognize that you won't see this guy for a long time. This is somebody that I spent hours and hours and hours with. I've wept with him. I've laughed with him. And I think emotionally I'm just going to be a wreck. But when you get in those moments of loss and you think, okay, what's next? What's left? You get those moments of loss, it's a struggle. So let's jump into these verses. Verse 1, it says, and Sarah was 107 and 20 years old, so 127. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. I think this is a pretty natural reaction, isn't it? All of a sudden, Sarah's 127, Abraham's 137. And get this, they were called to Canaan, back, if you do the math, we'll have to check with Barry afterwards, but 62 years since they've been called. They've been on this journey together for a long time. There's not a whole lot of people that can connect with Abraham like Sarah can in this moment, because they've had a journey together. They've had time together. They've been through things together that other people just won't connect with. And then all of a sudden in this journey, Abraham's lost his partner, his spouse. Yeah, they've made bad decisions. Haven't we all? It doesn't make the loss any less. And all of a sudden in this moment, he's struggling. He said he came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. I think the repetition kind of gives us that level of understanding of how strong he felt about all of this. But all of a sudden a question came up, because culturally they should be heading back to their homeland, quote unquote, to bury her. They should be returning to family. They should be going back to the burial place of their extended relatives to be able to take care of this. And so all of a sudden, Abraham has a choice. Now, whether you've recognized this in the past or not, this is a point where he could make it or break it, right? Because all of a sudden, this journey, he's coming to the end. He's recognizing that the end of life is coming, and all of a sudden he has to make this choice of, okay, now those that go on after us, I'm facing this fact of life is but a vapor. And so what about my children? What about my grandchildren? It's been tough. It's been crazy. I've been here. I've been there. And you know what? It'd be so much easier just to travel back and to be with the rest of my family and just end my days like that. And we'd find that connection. We'd find that support back in the homeland. And you got to be thinking about that, because we just went through 4 verses of relaying how the family is growing back in their homeland. And so he's come to this point. Do I go or do I stay? Is he committed to this? Is God's calling going to remain true in this? Does he run back to them? Because we all know that in a moment of loss, we get emotional. Have you ever made an emotional decision that you regretted? Have you ever looked back at some of the decisions that you made and you thought, where was I? Where was my mind? And you just come back to that point of, okay, it was all emotions that I relied on to make that decision. And yes, we've all made those decisions. We've all given up on what was reasonable to go by our feelings at some moment in our life. Sometimes we've ignored God for the sake of our emotions. Has anybody been there before? But I'm just not feeling it right now, God. And yet he has this moment to decide. And in our culture, you know what they would ask? What do you feel like doing? Well, why don't you do, have you ever heard this before? Why don't you do what's best for you? And in the moment of comfort, we think, yeah, that's going to help them make them feel good, and that's going to help them get past this and to transition. And yet in this moment, the question is, what does God want him to do? I need to seek him first. In the moment where I lose someone that's close to me, I've got to seek his face first. Let's go to the author of creation. Let's go to the one who fearfully and made that person that I have lost and loved for so long. Let's go to the one who fearfully and wonderfully made me and has a plan for me, and he's taken me where I am today. And it's just amazing how much God has moved us. And as it was asked this morning, and one of the ladies, she had asked, say, how many of your lives have gone exactly as you planned, and how many of you just laughed? Because we recognize that that wasn't not in my plans, and yet God is taking me from here to here to here, and he's taken me through the valley of the shadow of death, and I have feared no evil at times, and at times I have feared evil. And I've gone from here to here to here, and all of a sudden we've got to come back to this question of, God, what do you want from me right now? I feel like I'm in transition. Things are changing. I have to consult you first. And you know what? Abraham made the right decision. He relied on the promises of God, and he by faith remained where he was, where God called him to be. So we come to point number 2, the moment for putting down roots. This is a time where he needs to get established. And you know, this is kind of ironic. I think this is interesting. But it goes on, and in verse 3 it says, and Abraham stood before his dead and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Now, don't you find that ironic? Here this man has been in this area. He was called out 62 years ago and still feels like he's an out-of-towner. Has anybody ever felt like that in Taylorville? Okay? You just feel like, I'm not quite there yet. I still don't get accepted as a, what do you call it yourselves, Taylorvillians? Okay? All right? or wherever you might be, if it's Pana, Morrisonville, Hewittville, Langleyvillian, I don't know what you call yourselves, all right? But have you ever been to the point where you've been there for so long and you really just don't feel like you're connected, like you've put down your roots yet? And so he puts it here, listen, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. He's recognizing the fact that, yeah, he's come from a different place, but there's going to be a transition here. Give me a possession of a burying place with you that I may bury my dead out of my sight. I want a burying place. I want somewhere where I can continue to bury the dead. I'm looking forward, and I want to establish myself here and my family for the next generations. I want this to be our place where we can claim that this is ours. And you know, it's interesting as we go on, it says, and the children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, hear us, my Lord, thou art a mighty prince among us. You know, even though he was an out-of-towner, he still ended up making a good reputation with him. So you are a mighty prince. There was a level of respect that they had for him, even though he really wasn't a part of them. And they turn around and they say, in the choice of our sepulchres, so in the preferred of our sepulchres, bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. And you say, well, perfect. How many of you like free? Anybody like free? Okay, now what if it's the best of free? Okay? All right? We like that stuff, okay? What if someone offered you a 2022 Chevy Silverado straight off the lot? Now, even you Ford fans would say, bring it on, I'll take it. I'll take it, I'll drive it, all right? What if somebody just offered it to you right off the lot? Here, you are a mighty prince among us. Josh Clayton, you're a mighty prince among us. Here's a nice 2022 Chevy Silverado. Would you take it? You take your horns off of your old Ford and you'd put it on the new one, and you think, thank God I don't have to deal with any rust anymore, right? Okay? I'm in the same boat, all right? We're team, okay? And it's just like, yeah, praise God, I will take it. And you know, when you're in an emotional state and you suffered an amount of loss, you're even more prone to do things, right? And here he is. He needs a place to bury his wife who's just passed away. And he's in a place where he really doesn't own anything per se. And he's coming and he says, I need a burial ground for my family. And they say, hey, have what you want. We'll give it to you. But he doesn't take it. Why? We'll get there. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even the children of Heth. Do you like the humility that Abraham has in this moment? Do you think if all Christians claimed the same humility that Abraham has, do you think we'd get along better with people? You think people would like us a little bit better? Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth. But he communed with them, saying, if it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me to Ephron, the son of Zohar. So he's taking it a step further. If you're interested in offering me a burial place, I am looking for something specific, okay? That he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is in the end of his field, for as much money as it is worth. He shall give it me for a possession of a burying place amongst you. So he's going deeper. He says, okay, so if you're willing to give me a place just to bury my dead, I am willing to pay for just the cave on the end of this man's field. This is the one that I would love to have. And we get down to, and Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even of all that went in at the gate of his city. Now, you remember what the gate of the city means? That's where the decisions are being made culturally. That's where the important guys are. And they're in the midst of all these witnesses. This is a pretty big deal. And he comes in here and he says, "Nay, my Lord, hear me. The field give I thee, and the cave that is therein I give it thee. In the presence of the sons of my people give I it thee, bury the dead." So he says, sure, I'll give you the cave and the field that's connected with it. Man, I wish I could barter like Abraham, right? How many of you barter and you end up paying more for what you were trying to get it for, right? It's like, I thought we started off at this price, and why is it more? Why is it double? Okay? But he's got it to where, hey, I'll pay you for just this cave, and he says, I'll give you the cave and the field with it. And Abraham bowed down himself before the people of the land, and he spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, "But if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me. I will give thee money for the field. Take it of me, and I will bury my dead there." And Ephron answered Abraham, saying unto him, "My Lord, hearken unto me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that betwixt me and thee? Bury therefore thy dead." Now, I don't know if this is a huge amount for their economy. Economies come and they go, okay? But yet this is going from free to 400 shekels of silver. Here you go, bury him. This is what it's worth. And Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money with the merchant. And the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, that were in all the borders round about, were made sure. You get that? It's his. Unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth before all that went in at the gate of this city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah's wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. In verse 20, and the field and the cave that is therein were made sure unto Abraham for possession of the burying place by the sons of Heth. So all of a sudden we get through this story, this true fact of history here of Abraham jumping in here, and he's wanting this burial place. He wants to commit and establish and take root, to put up roots in this land that God has called him to. And he's not willing to just take it for free, because guess what? Has anybody ever given you something for free and they decided they want it back? Well, that's not really the agreement that we made. Well, I have a different plan for that. You know, Abraham didn't want any issues here, for one thing, okay? There's no takebacks. But this reminds me of a situation back in Genesis chapter 14. Do you remember in Genesis chapter 14 when the king of Sodom came in and he says, "Hey, I want to deal with the situation of all the captives and all the spoils that you got back from when we lost the battle"? Do you remember that? It goes in Genesis chapter 14, verse 22, and Abraham said to the king of Sodom, "I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich." Does that remind you of that situation? And you're going back to say, why is Abraham paying so much for this land? Because he doesn't want anyone else to get the glory. He doesn't want anyone else to take the glory away from God, and he knows that it's God that's giving it to him. And you know what? God's blessed him, and he's given him a ton of things. Okay, he can pay the 400 shekels of silver. And you go again to another passage here, where God is making this covenant. In the same day the Lord had made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Cadmonites and the Hittites. Who was Ephron? He's a Hittite. All of a sudden, the partial fulfillment of what God is giving to Abraham. And you know what? Abraham has committed in this moment, in this emotional moment, to say, listen, I know that God's blessed me. I'm going to take up roots here. I'm going to establish myself here because I am trusting in God. There is a faith factor here. I'm going to settle in when times get tough. God's promises remain. Here he says a partial fulfillment. You know what, Abraham, I think most people would just excuse him out of all of this and say, listen, Abraham, you've only seen a smidgen of what God has promised to you. You have every right as a Canaanite citizen to walk back to your homeland. Every right. And you know what? You know what I've noticed as Christians? There's times when we need to give up some of these rights. For the sake of who? God. And what he's called us to. He's called us to sacrifice. I don't know how much of a sacrifice it was for 400 shekels of silver for Abraham, but that seems like it's a pretty significant sacrifice for him. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it is. Silver's pretty expensive nowadays, but in that moment of understanding that he did give towards this, he did put some skin in the game in this situation where God's called him to, that just reflects for us. Doesn't matter what it is, but if God's called us to it, sometimes we've got to put a little skin in the game to settle in where we are, to establish ourselves where we are for the sake of his name. Let me ask you this. Do you trust that God has a plan for each one of you? Does that still apply in Taylorville, Illinois? I was watching a senior testimony from Taylorville High School. I can't even tell you who it was. Okay, it was just a girl from one of the sports teams, and the question was, where do you want to go after you graduate? You know what the answer was? Anywhere but here. I just want to get out. And some of you are saying, yeah, preach, do it, yeah, woo, 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 let's take us somewhere, right? And yet, I hope that we're training our teenagers and our children to seek God before ourselves. You know, for some odd reason, God's placed the church here in Taylorville, Illinois, right? What is that reason? To reach the lost. Is there any lost people in Taylorville, Illinois? What about in Christian County? But everybody's leaving. We should leave with them. There's still people here. Let's go get them. I was just at the music festival over at Taylorville. There's a lot of people that showed up to that. You know what I was thinking? Man, this could be a huge VBS. We'd have to extend our auditorium. You say, not another building project. If we had that many people, I don't think any of you would care. Bring them in. I mean, we sing about it all the time, right? Bring them in. But you know what? I think as people recognize where we're at, they can see where our contentment lies. And if we are discontent where we are, do you think anybody wants to be a Christian while watching us? If they see the discontentment, if they see God's called me here, so I'll just rough it. I'll just deal with it. I'll just tolerate it. We got to come back to that point, folks, of, okay, where's God called us to? Where's God placed us? Whether it be in our workplace or whether it be in the grocery store in our area, whether it be in the ward that we are in, whatever it might be, within our town, whatever it might be, God's called us to the specific place for a specific reason. What is it? Anybody got a direct point from God where everything you ask of him, he automatically says it right audibly to you? He says, God, what do you want out of me? Well, I want you to be here for this specific reason, to connect with this individual, and once they get saved, you're done. You can move on. Anybody got that? So what do? We love God where we're at. We love others where we're at. And how do we do that? We preach the gospel where we're at. Because this is our Jerusalem. This is where God has placed us to reach. But what if I don't like that teenager? He does weird things. I heard he ate a Tide Pod. I just don't connect with, I mean, come on, seriously. He speaks a totally different lingo. Like he says yeet and no cap and all these things, and I just don't connect with him. I'm just a totally different person. And I live in this area, and la-ti-da. And you know what? When Moses had all those excuses for God, you know how God responded? With grace, with mercy. He said, I've equipped you. I will give you what you need. I will give you who you need. Who do I say sent me? Remember what he said? Tell him I am sent you. The self-existent one. The God over everything. He doesn't need you or I, but yet he uses us. And he equips us and loves us through it when we don't usually love him back. When we're messed up tools. Anybody have a messed up tool at home? What do you do with it? Well, you beg for a new one, don't you? Okay? But you know what? We're like the old lazy boy that's fallen apart that God, holds on to, right? This is mine. Anybody ever done that? Your wife's trying to get rid of your lazy boy. No, this is where I fit. I fit in this thing. This is mine. I bought this 37 years ago, and I will keep this till the day that I die. And this is mine. You know what? We're that messed up lazy boy that God has bought. And he continues to use us in our messed up ways. But thank God for the grace. Thank God for his mercy that we didn't just get wiped out. And here it is. We come to this point. We've got to check ourselves. Are we content where we're at? Are we willing to, by faith, settle in? I get it. Some moments, there's times to transition. I was talking, if you remember this morning, Seth, he was in my class at Northland, and we talked, and we worked through some conversations of where's God taken us. And I was reflecting back on one ministry that I was in, and he said, what happened there? And I said, me and the leadership did not get along, and I just didn't feel like they were following after God in the way that they should be. They weren't seeking his direction. It was totally directionless. I couldn't be a part of that anymore. I knew that God was directing me in a different direction. And so sometimes that happens. Sometimes we work through that. Sometimes God does direct us, but until he does, let's settle in where we're at. Let's love God and love others where we're at.